The issue of martial courts hovers over our heads as we tackle Ugandan's political history that has been marked by authoritarianism, weak institutions, and civil war. These martial courts, while serving to suppress dissent and maintain political control, they've also negatively implicated the citizens' trust in the justice system, violated human rights, amongst many factors. Joining me today is Robert Kigongo, a Sustainable Development Analyst who is based in Uganda. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, my host and all the listeners. I'm privileged to be hosted on Valentine's Day. It's a day of sharing love, but unfortunately, as we are sharing love, the world is going through unprecedented injustices and lack of constitutionalism, from Uganda to Sudan to Gaza, Ukraine, Democratic Republic of Congo. They are not celebrating love because of the injustices that are being made on by those who are supposed to protect them.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, welcome to the space. We do hope that at least with the sessions that we're having, we can at least through knowledge try to spread that love in a way of trying to enable the citizen, or rather open the eyes of the citizen as to what is happening in their own continent. So today's topic, looking at this situation of the martial course that's been, or rather the martial law that has been used and practiced and implemented within the Ugandan country, it seems to have a history that has literally drawn all the way back, decades way back. Do you mind just telling us brief history as to what, or rather how it went about, how it started, how it's continued through time, and why it's actually still a case that we're still dealing with within this year?
Uganda is a country that has existed for 63 years, and out of the 63 years, it has had 9 presidents. But from the 9 presidents, it has never transferred power peacefully. It has always been military coups and unconstitutional forms of changing the government. However, as we approached the post-independence era, we had Obote 1, then we went to Obote was overthrown by Idi Amin Dada, who eventually became a dictator at the time using military mechanism, and he suspended whatever was aligned to constitutionalism, including the parliament. He became the parliament himself. He lasted for 9 years, but Amini's behavior of unconstitutionalism provoked young leaders of the time, like Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, to join the armed force, the guerrilla forces, helped by Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, the president of Tanzania by the time. They went to Mozambique and had a serious training, and later eventually overthrowing Amin in 1979, which ushered in a series of government and political instabilities. However, we were able to have an election in 1980 with Obote 2, Obote returning back to Uganda. And then, but Obote came through a very rigorous election that was made of injustices, vote rigging, that prompted the current president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and other young men of the time to go into a liberation war and started again their guerrilla movement that eventually overthrew Obote and Tito Okello Lutwa's governments in 1986. And up to date, we are still being ruled by the same NRA government, welcoming the guerrilla forces that overtook power, had dismantled the National Army that had been contracted way back by the British and then the successors of Obote. That led us into the NRA Army, the National Resistance Army. But over time, Ugandans had to build a consensus, and we formed the Uganda People's Defense Forces. that is still here up to date. It came into action with an act that it is a people's army. It should never be a personal army. Whichever president comes, this UPDF will continue with whatever president has come. But over time, it has been manipulated. It has been used by the current regime to keep its grip on power. And that explains the abuse of power, abuse of the doctrine of separation of power, and hence ushering in the military court martial.
If I could just enter there, why do you think these martial court rulings or the martial law, why do you suppose it's still key, or rather still key to like political activities within the country? What's still keeping it in power?
One, if you have a guerrilla leader who came into power through a coup, they always have insecurities. So they invest a lot of money into building a structure, a military structure that we all benefit in as a country because it protects our borders, it protects us from uh, external and internal enemies, hence keeping security and then maintaining political stability. But in the new event, it's also used to keep grip on power, to keep the current leader on power. A UPDF is supposed to be non-partisan or bipartisan, serving all Ugandans, but it is only serving the interest of that particular guerrilla leader, who is actually also patronizing it as his army. But also because some members of the UPDF are very cautious, they have had very different opinions from the president himself, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Like we have General Mugisha Muntu, who was a CDF commander, Defense Forces, who opposed the removal of the term limits, and that caused him troubles, and it led to his dismissal from the army. We've had Dr. Kano Kizza Besigye, who is a former guerrilla leader, a personal doctor to the current president, Yoweri Museveni, but because he disagreed with the way how UPDF was being run and affairs in the country, we've had many have ended up going in very, very unsuspicious ways, So it has been patronized. So it's a discretion to promote the interest of one person. But those who disagree with him are dismissed from the army. But the president or the current leader pays attention to these details. So he constituted other units or divisions like the Special Forces Command that purely protects his interest away from the UPDF. Initially, it was supposed to be a unit within the UPDF, but now it's a full brigade and a full structure with its own structures. So there has been duplication of services, duplication of everything that the UPDF does is done by the SFC. And there are also other forces like the JAT, the CMI. These are independent structures away from even the UPDF, yet by command they're supposed to be under the UPDF. Only that now they are coming back to line since the Ugandan forces are commanded by the first son, General Gaba. So because he's the founder of these other organizations like SFC, meant to protect his father, so now he's controlling all these other units.
So even with political critics, they've actually mentioned the fact that in addition to that, it's also a matter of literally having a weak judiciary. So over the years, due to that, ideally, martial law has been carrying on. Would you agree with that statement, or would you think otherwise?
Recently, the Supreme Court has just passed a decision banning the trial of civilians in military courts. And this has caused a lot of havoc and a very hot contestation, but also with some good reactions from the citizens and also the hierarchy. The executive has dismissed the judiciary that it's not judges who rule the country, it's him who rules the country, that while he was in the bush, they were sleeping. But We remember Uganda has a constitution. Uganda purports to be a democracy. Of course, the democracy is sugar-coated. It's sugar-coated. The truth of the matter, we are living in a democracy with a blend of kleptocracy and authoritarianism and a military rule. But Article 99 mandates the president to protect all citizens. And this is a violation of Article 99. And also, the UPDF goes ahead to violate Article 23, Section 6 of the 1995 Constitution that protects the doctrine of separation of powers.
And do you mind just explaining further for our listeners, what is the separation of powers?
The government has three arms. You have the judiciary, which is the executive first, which is led by the president. You have the legislature, which is led by the speaker. You have the judiciary, which is led by the chief justice. These are meant to be independent institutions when it comes to critical decisions to avoid abuse of power or one overriding the other. But because Article 99, Section B, subjects the president to appoint the judiciary officials in Uganda, unlike in Kenya, where they're elected by everybody. So the judiciary we have are mainly cadre judicial officers, those who align with the system. But their consciousness comes back when the citizens keep hacking, scratching their conscience. They at least they wake up and do what the citizens want. So the doctrine of separation of powers is meant to protect constitutionalism. That let legislature do its job, let the executive do its job, and let also the judiciary. At the end of it all, when the country is in a mess, the last resort is the judiciary. You see in the United States, Donald Trump is passing executive orders against foreign aid, against for federal duties, but it is the judiciary that is telling him it is serving as the guardrail. So the judiciary is the guardrail of unconstitutional tendencies and injustices. So once we lose that independence of the judiciary, then the doctrine of separation of powers ceases to be, and therefore constitutionalism ceases to exist. And that means the country is not a democracy, but rather an authoritarian rule or a totalitarian the way it is in North Korea, Belarus, Russia, China.
And I think it's quite essential that we emphasize that the whole idea of like separation of powers is also, it's an element that's mostly common in so-called democratic factions or democratic states. And once it's broken or once it's a weak, kind of like institution between the three, then it's really troublesome for that country. And now just looking at the ruling that has been done in terms of, the Supreme Court, it has had significant implications, I'm pretty sure, especially when it comes to the balance of power between the military, the executive, and the judiciary. How do you suppose this decision could affect the relationship between these institutions, and what challenges or opportunities do you see arising from this implementation?
One, doctrine of separation of powers does not mean total disregard of the other arms. These all the three arms are supposed to support each other, but they must have some relevant independence, and that protects constitutionalism. I would give an example of the decision that was passed by the Supreme Court. It has revoked a thinking or an idea of revising the UPDF Act, and probably Parliament has just brought that it has presented that the UPDF Act has to change. Because first of all, those court martials are not even court martials, they are tribunals. meant to settle disputes and then also to discipline the armed officers that have misbehaved. But then serving as a military court doesn't really justify that it serves justice. But then also, there has been some quick win. At least the judiciary has long been insinuated, or the citizens have been on its case that where is your independence? At least now their conscience is back. Then at least we can say moderately they have served the citizens. They are protecting the Constitution. They are protecting Article 44 of the Constitution that protects citizens from abuse of their human rights and freedoms. And remember, the regime now uses the military courts to tame off the political opponents. So it's often the political opponents that are taken to these courts, the likes of Dr. Kizza Besigye, the likes of Kyagulanyi, Robert, the leader of the National Unity Platform, the National Unity Platform political prisoners. They are arrested and spend 4 years without trial, contravening Article 23 that provides that a citizen is supposed to be provided with bail. So there has been some win. As we talked yesterday, Dr. Kizza Besigye was taken to a civil court at Uganda Road. So that was a win, that ruling. As we talk, the political prisoners, there is a conversation of releasing them because they are in a wrong court. Aaron Kizza, a lawyer of Dr. Kano Kizza Besigye, was imprisoned 9 months to Chitalia instantly, without trial, without any fair hearing. So all these cases are now under review. So there were some quick wins by the Supreme Court, and it also provoked the president to now appoint Deputy Chief Justice, because we didn't have any, and also to appoint more other judges, because there is a lot of backlog within courts, which leads to delayed justice. And we all know justice delayed is justice denied. So these are all wins. The citizens are actually winning.
That is wonderful to hear. Do you think with the pending rulings or the rulings that were done through these courts, do you suppose in them being reviewed, they could potentially be thrown out of court? Do you suppose that happening?
And there's been a lot of backlash from the executive on this Supreme Court ruling. And the president has written a very, very long letter. The CDF has come out to say this country is not for the judges. It is what we say that will work out. So there is some bit of hesitance. The executive is being adamant and insisting that they will keep on doing what they've been doing, which is very, very, very unfortunate. But we have faith. We have faith that there will be restoration of the justice system, because surely our justice system had gone to the dogs. Justice is expensive. It goes to the rich. Justice, it goes to those who align with the regime. If you don't align with the regime, that is subject to punishment. We've seen it in many cases. Yet, we have an incident of a gentleman called Kanyamunyu. He killed a fellow civilian called Akena. But Kanyamunyu has been tried in civil courts, not in the military court. And you have Olivia retired, a lady, a mother of 2 children, who has been in military court for 4 years, later on released, and that this is a compromise that he should support the regime. So all these exhibit a very, very terrible situation for our constitutionalism and justice. Justice denied to one is justice denied to all. An injustice in Uganda is an injustice to someone in South Africa, to someone in Zimbabwe. So it's upon us. But at least we are willing. In some cases, we hope all things will be better. These prisoners will be released with time. But also, it's also about the upcoming elections. This ruling may not have may not have helped us, but it is going to help us in 2026. But also, such decisions are also precedents for academic purposes, for other cases. They become yardsticks of other cases. So I believe we are in the right trajectory. We believe the EDF will serve Ugandans very diligently as expected too.
No, that is definitely true. I mean, the minute conversations start, that's the beginning of change. And just looking back at the ruling itself and the way, in a sense, it protects the individual rights and freedoms of the civilians, how do you suppose they can safeguard that act of, you know, extension in terms of protecting the civilian and possibly prevent, future potential abuses of power?
One, there's been a lot of whoever is taken to those court martials, the
Hmm.
intention was to tame off citizens from participating in politics and also to cause what we call a strongman syndrome within the population.
Mm,
And when you imprison your opponents, you project that strongman syndrome. It's
mhm,
common in Africa and authoritarian countries, but the response from the Supreme Court siding with justice projects a pushback against injustices, against authoritarianism. So that's a win for Ugandans
mhm,
and for Africans in general. But also, uh, it's taming the behaviors of the UPDF, also protecting them from sanctions. Some of our UPDF high hierarchy officials have been sanctioned by the United States and the UK and European Union
mm,
over misuse of power, over using these courts, over subjecting citizens to torture and inhuman treatment, degrading all sort of atrocities. So
mm,
at least it is not only protecting the citizens, but also protecting those same officers, because these officers, they are also Ugandans, but we want them to have that humanity within them, much as they
mm.
are serving officers. So it's helping both the UPDF personnel and the civilian personnel.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, you've already started touching on, I think, the next point, or rather the next question that I wanted to find out from you was how you possibly anticipate the public and international community, how they would possibly respond to this ruling. And you've already touched on it briefly with regards to the sanctions themselves. But in as much as there's sanctions, do you suppose it's enough? Like, are we doing enough? Because it's one thing to try and safeguard, the rights of civilians of another country, as an, from an international community perspective. And one way to go about that is through sanctions. But is it enough to actually, ensure that human rights are actually adhered to and protected?
It's not entirely enough, but it's a great step and a gesture
Hmm.
towards protecting human rights, but also building democratic societies. There are also other mechanisms like the citizens rising through civic spaces.
Mm,
There are also other mechanisms of cutting off aid.
mm,
This also helps in taming the behavior of the executive and the UPDF. But we believe baby steps are also important. This was a
mhm,
baby step, and we welcome it in its true sense. We want to achieve the Nelson Mandela dream of
mm,
democratizing Africa, and such steps are very key to achieving the Nelson Mandela's dream. An
mm,
Africa that is peace at itself, where no country treats its citizens as as third citizens, but rather as equal citizens.
No, definitely. When you remind me now of King Luther on his speech of I have a dream. We definitely do all have a dream. And yeah, it's a matter of just putting it into perspective and trying to put it into implementation. So, just to conclude, what message do you think this decision about the country's commitment to democracy and the rule of law, uh, what message do you think, or rather, in what way do you suppose it would influence global perceptions of governance within Uganda?
One, Uganda has been, if you've watched recently the Fox News, and Uganda is commonly known for injustices, corruption, and all other atrocities. Yet Uganda is a very beautiful country, endowed with a beautiful scenery, very good people, hospitable. But this is changing now the image of this country.
Mm,
But also, these incidents of the Supreme Court are also serving as a yardstick to other authoritarian countries that citizens can actually push back. So it's a good gesture towards democracy, but my clarion call to the international community is please keep an eye on Uganda, because injustice in one part of the
mm,
world is injustice everywhere. So you, as Africa Connect Democracy Development Program, it's important that you keep an eye on Uganda. It is the international community that pushed the UPDF to release Honorable Robert Chagulanyi in 2017 when he was put in the military court martial. If it wasn't for that, he would have been charged for possessing guns that he never possessed. It is the international community that is actually helping us to shed light on some of these injustices. So it's important for the
mhm,
international community to keep an eye on Uganda, but also the Uganda's case serves as a case elsewhere. What is
mm,
happening in Uganda is not so unique. It's happening in DRC Congo, the injustices you're seeing in DRC Congo. It happened in Sudan. It's happening in Gaza. They're happening in other parts of the world.
mm,
But we can be a yardstick of pushing back authoritarianism, of how citizens can fight. All this started from a Twitter space where Ugandans staged a
mhm,
demonstration in a digital space
mm,
and put Justice Owini Dolo on scale about his legacy as the Chief Justice of Uganda. And I think that woke him up and said, guys, we are losing our credibility. We better wake up and save the citizen from this mess, because what we are doing today may be subjected to tomorrow. We had an IGP called Kari Karihura. He opposed
mhm,
the 42 hours rule, but within 1 year he was subjected to that rule. He was yearning for bail, but he was denied bail because he was the one who opposed the 40 hours date rule. So we must all yearn for justice
mm,
as we celebrate life today, because justice to one is justice to all. We are achieving the SDGs. SDG 16 is focused at just strong institutions and justice, but not just for few individuals who support the regime, but justice for all. Not just justice for Ugandans,
mhm,
but justice for everyone. Justice for the refugees, but also safeguarding democracy and constitutionalism mitigates the influx of refugees. Today, the refugees we have in Uganda, the Eritreans, it's out of the injustices that are happening in Eritrea. The the overwhelming numbers of refugees that you have in South Africa are a
mm,
result of injustices elsewhere in other parts of Africa. So when we safeguard, when democracy, when we yearn for justice in a
mm.
particular part of the continent, we are actually safeguarding our own countries.
Yes, 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 definitely. And we end with that, with one message: justice for all. Thank you so much, Robert. We hope to have you once again.
Thank you so much. But the road to a democratic society, a democratic Africa, or democratizing Africa starts with caring about the issues in a country, with driving public discourse. It is public discourse that led to the changes in the justice system of Uganda, that now citizens, the civilians are no longer tried in military courts. So public discourse is very, very critical. We must all participate as the cardinal principle of democracy. Participation is very, very critical. Thank you.